Welcome back to Succeed with Dyslexia. Here we discuss news and topics that go on in the dyslexic community. So make sure you like this video, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss any of our future videos. We have a very special episode for you today. In our first segment, our director here at Succeed with Dyslexia had the opportunity to interview Matt Hancock. Following this, we'll be showcasing an introduction to our Drop Everything and Read campaign. Now, without further ado, I'll pass it over to Darren to give us a brief introduction on his interview with Matt Hancock.
Here at Succeed with Dyslexia, we want to let you know on a global scale what's happening in the world of dyslexia. Now, over in the UK, there is an MP called Matt Hancock who's currently pushing a bill to get early screening for dyslexia into the educational system, into the primary schools. Now, this could be absolutely game-changing. If we were able to help and screen children for dyslexia and then them going on to a formal diagnosis, it could really help the students. As we know statistically how many students leave school undiagnosed with dyslexia. We had the opportunity to be invited to go and speak with Matt Hancock to understand not only just the bill that he's pushing forward, but his own experiences with his own diagnosis of dyslexia. Please do check out the video and the interview that I had with Matt, and as always, let us know in the comments below what you think. So a massive welcome to Succeed with Dyslexia interview. We have an incredible guest. We have the Right Honourable Matt Hancock, who is going to be joining us today. Thank you so much indeed for your time today. We're going to be asking Matt around dyslexia, his experience around dyslexia, and again, the bill that he's kind of working on at the moment. So Matt, thank you again for taking some time out of your incredibly busy schedule.
It's a pleasure, and I've been following your podcasts, and I think it's absolutely brilliant getting the message out, a positive message about dyslexia, so thank you very much for having me.
No, the pleasure is all ours. So Matt, I'm dyslexic myself, and it would be just fantastic if you could just tell our kind of listeners a little bit about your kind of diagnosis and a little bit about you with your dyslexia, if you wouldn't mind sharing.
Yeah, so this subject really matters to me. And it matters because of my own personal experience. And, you know, when you have the privilege of being in Parliament, you can make change happen. And for me, it's very personal, this. I was diagnosed as dyslexic only at the age of 18. When I'd gone to university. At school, I got through by concentrating more and more on maths-based subjects, and fortunately, I'm lucky to be decent enough at maths. And I just thought I was rubbish at English and other foreign languages, and I just couldn't do it. And it was then when I got to university, and I'd applied to do an essay-based subject, I got in on an interview, and then A-levels that were like maths, physics, computing, so numbers based. Yeah. And there I was at Oxford University, so, you know, very serious university, doing an essay-based subject. And I got to the end of the first term, my tutor took me to one side and he said, "Look, Matt, you can talk the talk, but you can't write." And I've always been quite, you know, good with my, orally able to talk. Maybe that's why I ended up in the profession that I have. And he's then suggested that I get a formal assessment, which the university did for me. And then they gave me incredible support, essentially to relearn how to read and write. And I took it from there.
And that's, when we talk about diagnosis, that's very late on, isn't it? Did you say you were 18?
Yeah, 18? I was 18. Yeah, I remember it was sort of December of my first term. I actually went to university when I was 17, and then so I was just 18, and I'd missed out on that all the way through school. Absolutely. And, you know, some people say to me, since I started this campaign to have universal screening, because that's the thing that I, you know, could have done with at primary school. Yes. Some people have said, "Oh, you don't want to label kids as dyslexic." But the honest truth is, you label yourself. In my case, I labelled myself as no good at reading or writing. Yes. And it's not just that you can't get the support, it's about the self-esteem as well.
I completely agree. That confidence level, prior to that, did you realise that there was something that, with regards to kind of the reading, writing, dyslexia? Yeah. Obviously, it was undiagnosed prior to that. Yeah. So you felt it was almost, there was something, but you didn't really know what it was.
I didn't know what it was. I just thought I was rubbish with words. And, there were moments that I can still remember. I can remember driving, being driven by my parents. So maybe I was a teenager, maybe a bit younger, and driving past a sign near my home in Cheshire, where I grew up, and I said, Mum, what does Swan Wood mean? And she said, what do you mean Swan Wood? I said, there's a sign, somebody's selling Swan Wood. And she said, I don't know what you're talking about. And then the next day we drove past the same thing. I said, there, that sign, it says Swan Wood. She says, Matt, that says Sawn Wood. And my brain, even the second time round, it had just misread the letter order and then misread it again in exactly the same way. And that is an absolutely classic condition of dyslexia.
Absolutely. And I guess, for me, I was diagnosed very late on, 36.
Right.
So it was the very kind of late diagnosis. This is why I, like yourself, very passionate in the sense of making early diagnosis, accessible for all. But with regards to pronunciations of words as well, I struggle with that. I'd use words as sauce, ketchup. I'd say sauce, and it would be picked up.
Right.
Was there any kind of was the pronunciation side of it? Did you struggle?
Yes.
With?
Well, I still do. So whilst I was essentially taught how to read. And I see each word as a picture. So the problem that I have with that is new words. I'm shamefully terrible at all foreign languages because I find just the pure vocab very, very difficult. But also long technical words. So for instance, when I was health secretary, I needed to learn the word dexamethasone because the trials run by Oxford University, as it happens, had discovered that it could reduce the chances of you dying of COVID by a third. And it was the first treatment. And JVT and I were going to do the press conference, and I couldn't get this word into my head. So if you tell me an unfamiliar word, I will not be able to repeat it back to you. It takes a lot of learning for me to get a new word into my head so I can say. So we were preparing for this press conference, and honestly, it probably took half an hour just of me repeating the word dexamethasone over and over again, because it was no use looking at it. I mean, it was just a total jumble of letters. And I actually remember when I was first appointed health secretary, the thing that I was most worried about was all of the complicated language of clinical life, which is mostly based on Latin and Greek, long compound words. I thought, I'm just not going to be able to cope with that. And it's interesting because part of your job as a senior politician is trying to translate technical language into language that everybody can understand. Actually, it became a strength, not a weakness, because I don't take for granted that you can say a word. Yeah. But it was so funny, me trying to learn decamethasone. I just got it wrong over and over and over. And the deadline was coming, and we were on the box at 5 o'clock that day. And I knew that in the end I did the statement in Parliament, and the Prime Minister announced this great new discovery. But I was half an hour with one of the best clinical communicators in the world, just trying to get this word into my head. So it still affects me, but I've worked out loads of mitigations now.
So that's, I mean, one of the things that are, the community that we have within Succeed is that kind of coping mechanisms. Yeah. And I believe, that having someone kind of sponsor you, I guess, or believe in you, and that's what you found when you went to university. Yes. Someone really kind of believed in you and kind of took you under the wing. Do you kind of have that now, in the sense that someone, even now with being able to kind of learn, use your tactics like you did with the spelling?
That's a great question, actually, because I've kind of learned to do it myself, I guess. And, in this case, I asked JVT to, because, he was the sponsor of the whole project. And
why wouldn't you?
And in that sense, I was, I'm lucky to be surrounded by people who are themselves brilliant communicators. And so I have a whole load of people who are, especially in government, who are there to help you to communicate as best as you can. Now, it's a very difficult job communicating in government, but at least there was the support. I suppose what I'd say is that for years I was really embarrassed about being dyslexic. So it helped me when I was identified and diagnosed. But I then didn't talk about it for about 20 years because I thought it would hold me back in the workplace. And I couldn't have been more wrong. And when I eventually, when I was appointed to the cabinet as culture secretary, which was my first cabinet post, my new private secretary, I said to him, look, one of the things you need to know in confidence is that I'm dyslexic. And so all the paperwork that you put in my box, you need to make sure there's a one-page cover note. And I'll read the one-pager and I'll decide whether to delegate that note to somebody to make a decision or whether I put in the time, because I'm quite a slow reader, to read the whole thing. And that also allowed me to focus on the big decisions and let the team, the junior ministers, for instance, take the decisions that I didn't have a strong view on. And he said to me, I'm dyslexic too. He said, you've got to talk about it. You know, you've reached the cabinet and you're dyslexic. And there will be kids out there who will want to know that you can achieve in life if you're dyslexic. And in fact, he was the guy who encouraged me to speak out as a public figure.
And that's incredible because, you know, the aspirations I feel, you know, when you speak to the kind of, you know, my mindset, I guess, there's almost kind of a ceiling that you think that you can aspire to. And then, you know, that kind of, when you have the dyslexia as well, it's almost like this hidden shame, I guess, and that you don't want to mention it in workplaces or anything else because you may feel that may, you know, stop that. So having yourself bring, you know, that out to the table, I guess, and, you know, will inspire so many more people to think, well, actually, why can't I achieve, you know?
Well, if I can inspire one person to feel comfortable with their dyslexia and see the benefits that it brings, then it will have been worth it. And in fact, the public response I got when I first spoke about it was incredible. And in fact, another member of the cabinet, Brandon Lewis, he said, well, in fact, I'm dyslexic too. And he'd had the same approach. He was also, you know, shy about it. Yeah. But he, you know, so we're like London buses, you know, dyslexic cabinet ministers.
But it takes someone to lead, doesn't it? Lead in the sense of, you know, when we make these decisions, actually, you know, I want to talk about it. And then that support, then other people kind of start following.
Well, I hope so. And, you know, there's a lot of good work that's being done to promote the fact that the sorts of skills that dyslexic people tend to be best at, which are more about, you know, lateral thinking and creativity, are the skills that are increasingly needed in the modern workplace. And this is so we should be proud. Yes, get the support, but also feel self-confident in yourself. It's just that our minds work differently. We're just wired differently. We think differently. Absolutely.
And mentioning kind of the workplace, if we take kind of the educational system let's say, you know, in the UK, you know, primary school, secondary school, college, university, and then kind of the workplace, and that support, which, you know, we'll go into, you know, the bill that you were doing in Parliament and you know, the screening, the diagnosis. That support, I find, if we don't get the support in primary school and then secondary school and you know, within the university, when you get into the workplace, it gets more and more increasingly difficult.
Yeah.
So with regards to the actual screening and the diagnosis, I'm absolutely, you know, really passionate around the fact that I think primary school is definitely, you know, the right kind of age. Could you kind of elaborate a little bit about what you're kind of working on?
Yes, so we're working on the bill that will come in front of the UK Parliament next month, and it proposes to do two things. The first is to put a duty on primary schools to make sure that every child is screened for dyslexia. And I want to leave open the details of exactly how, not least because technology is moving fast in this area, but we should have a screening tool available that's, I hope, for free, online screening. Now, that isn't the formal assessment. What the screening will do is give data and indicate to teachers who's got a problem and who will need the formal assessment. The formal assessments have got to be rigorous and still need human involvement, you know, a full-blown assessment. But the screener will give data on every pupil, on their strengths and weaknesses. And what I think it needs to do, based on the experts I've been talking to, is it needs to measure your phonic capability of translating letters into language, with your oral capability, because it's the disparity between the two that is the typical neurodiversity that is dyslexia. Now, of course, there are other neurodiverse conditions as well, which are also important, but some of them are more difficult to spot through a tool that's easily available, because we've got to take into account the cost of this. But half an hour with a free or low-cost screener per pupil in primary school is a small price to pay for the improvement that can be made for all those children who are dyslexic. And in the UK, I think it is shameful that only 1 in 5 children leave school with their dyslexia identified. Only 1 in 5 dyslexic children. And we can do so much better than that.
Absolutely, and it shouldn't take to get to university, so to speak, or the work,
or 36,
or 36 to get to a stage where you're then kind of looking back on were the signs there, were people there to kind of help, and I feel confidence plays a massive part, because I concur with yourself when you say you had this ability to want to succeed, but there was something behind that was holding you back. And it could be for me standing up in class, or writing on the board, or reading out loud. So confidence plays a massive part within this.
And also, there are ways that you can work around it, but all the better if you know about the problem. I'm very grateful that some guy in Microsoft invented spell checker, right at the start of my career. In fact, I had the chance, I met him in Downing Street once and could shake his hand and say thank you, because I don't know if I'd ever been able to get going in my career if it hadn't been for that wiggly red line.
But it's and that's where the kind of with dyslexia we mentioned about entrepreneurs and people in the business. The structure, I guess, is set in the educational system in a certain way to learn, in a certain way. And I take my hat off to teachers. I think they do an absolutely incredible job. And then in certain places in the workplace, you have to kind of you almost put an application form out, and you have a member of staff coming, and they have to kind of tick all the boxes. And it's just trying to get more workplaces as well to try and. Would you say that that's something that we need to kind of work?
I think this is really important. So the bill will require universal screening, and also put a requirement on the Secretary of State to ensure teacher training includes training in neurodiversity, because every teacher is a teacher of dyslexic children, right? And that training just isn't there now. But the bill isn't everything. There's a massive campaign that you're part of, there's so many people are part of, to change attitudes and to give people self-confidence. And you're absolutely right about the workplace, making sure that ways that people assess for recruitment and assess internally for promotion take into account the different ways that people think. Because I've never been involved in a decision that isn't a better decision if you have people who think differently coming at it from the problem from different angles.
Absolutely. And we've worked with a lot of kind of corporate businesses, some big banks and some big industries, and what the response that we've had is that you've got some really great talented people, but the application to get quite a high profile job. There's a lot of online tests. There's all this kind of interview, and a lot of them fall through that hurdle. They'll probably get to stage 3 and not be able to do the actual test. So I think it's really kind of understanding within the business, how do we recruit, and once how we've got someone that we recruit, how do we look after them in that sense and harness the skills? Look,
ultimately it's about getting the best out of everyone. A business can get so much more out of people if they and their sort of internal systems encourage everybody to be the best they can be and pull people through based on a true assessment of talent. In the same way that I believe everybody's got a contribution to make in society, and it's the job of government to help people to get to do the best they can, to achieve the most they can. And so whether it's in business where, I would argue that there's a strong business case for seeking out and supporting neurodiverse people in the workplace, so too the government has a role, not just in education, but also, for instance, in the criminal justice system, of making sure people get the support they need so they can get the most out of their life. And we all know the statistics in terms of people in prison. We've had a cheerful conversation, not least because I managed to do okay with my dyslexia. For some people, they don't get that support. I was lucky to be good enough at maths-based subjects to get to Oxford. I was lucky to be spotted at Oxford, and then get the support that I needed. Not everybody has that support, and too many then end up in the criminal justice system.
Absolutely, and it could just be just a couple of wrong decisions, or certain things that kind of happen, and then, like you said, it is a kind of a not like to use the terminology, kind of a slippery slope in that sense. If they don't have someone supporting or identifying it, and it could just be there's certain things within dyslexia. It could, finances, it could be trouble as well. Reading certain bills that come through, or there's so many different attributes within dyslexia that can kind of affect, the individual.
Yes, look, I'm acutely aware of the fact that I don't want to make my understanding my personal story the sort of basis of policy. It's the basis of my motivation.
Indeed.
But then there is a spectrum, both to dyslexia and then to other neurodiverse conditions.
Yeah.
What I really want to do both with the bill and the broader campaign is to be a champion for us thinking about neurodiversity differently. And in a way, society over the last 20, 30 years has made lots of progress on different types of diversity, whether that's the color of your skin or your gender or sexual orientation. But neurodiversity is the one where there hasn't been as much progress.
Yeah.
And I think that there ought to be, and I think we'll be better as a society for it. I think businesses will be better for it. But most importantly, it's to give support and confidence to people who are neurodivergent, are dyslexic, to make sure that they get the support to get the best out of their lives.
Absolutely, and a lot of that comes from awareness.
Yes.
If I think about dyslexia, we're speaking more about it this year than we did last year, and more again than we did the year before, and so on.
Yeah.
When we think of kind of dyslexia 5-10 years ago, or even 20 years ago, it wasn't kind of topical. And you bring into Parliament, the bill it then takes it to that kind of next level. We have some incredible companies jumping on board and helping neurodiverse talent. So what would you hope to see sort of going forward over the next sort of say 5 years?
Well, I think this is the next frontier of inclusivity, if you like, of making sure that everybody in society gets the opportunity to make the most of everything that there is to offer. What I'd like to see is the education system be really there, both rigorous, yes, but also supportive. To obviously have that universal screening, and then the formal assessment there for people who need it and who the screening has picked up. But the bigger change is a change of attitude for those of us who are dyslexic to really embrace that and say it just gives us a different way of thinking. And rather than, people feeling shameful, which the word you use, and sadly that is too often true.
I think it is, and you alluded to the fact, and I agree that if I was to mention I'm dyslexic, does that then stop a potential promotion, or does that stop?
Yeah.
And I think a lot of it is down to awareness. A lot of it is if an employer is able to say, okay, so we have a structure in place to help and support dyslexic individuals. It doesn't come as kind of too daunting for the HR or the company owner.
Yeah.
If someone, I guess it's what I'm trying to say is, it's having that avenue of then, where do you go? If you go to an organization and say, I'm dyslexic, what support can you give me?
Yeah.
And if an organization says, well, we don't know.
Yeah.
The normal question is, what do you need?
Yeah.
And if you ask someone that, what do you need? Okay, do you need software? Do you need this? And sometimes people are at different stages within their dyslexia, so they don't really know what they need.
Yeah.
If I was asked, what I needed many years ago when I mentioned about dyslexia, I'd say, I don't know. How can you support? So I guess it's just having that process in place.
That's right. And there are increasingly all these support tools available, whether it's the technology. I mean, I joked about a spell check, 20 years ago, but it was an absolute revolution. And now it happens, on your phone all the time. You're presented with the word options, and as you type with your fat thumbs. So it's just become part of normal life. Then there are more specific elements of support for people who might need something differently. There's more and more support available, and we just need to drive that and make sure people feel able to access it. So the culture change is a really big part of that.
Absolutely, and one of the things that we're doing within Succeed, and obviously you're doing as well, is that awareness campaign.
Yeah.
We run campaigns in the UK and across the globe as well. And I hope by having these kind of conversations and doing these campaigns and putting bills, to Parliament, will encourage even more people to, just to start having those conversations, or start thinking, maybe I am dyslexic, maybe, and speaking to their families or friends or colleagues. And that's what we hope to happen.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really, really important. There's the policy changes, but there's also a culture change that I think we're living through, but we've got some way still to go.
Fantastic. Matt, thank you so much indeed for your time today. It's been an absolute pleasure speaking to yourself, and good luck with the continuous work that you do with Parliament and raising awareness for dyslexia.
Likewise. Thanks for having me.
In our last segment, we're going to show you a brief introduction to our Drop Everything and Read campaign and how you can get involved. Help us advocate for reading for all. Spread the message that it doesn't matter how you read, it's what you read that counts. Get involved. Follow us to know more. Thank you so much for watching. We hope you enjoyed this video as much as we did putting it together. Now we have some more fantastic content for you. Please feel free to click this link here and learn more about Tom Hunt as he discusses some of the ways that we can cater to dyslexic individuals in order to make sure their educational needs are met. If you have any comments or questions, leave them in the comments below. And as always, thank you so much for watching.